the joke in the industry is the ideal speaker is infinitely loud, and and takes up no room.
You can't see it, maybe. It's like you hide these
right.
things. And that's a big part of it, obviously, isn't it? Yeah, I'm Nic Harcourt, and we're talking to Rick Kamlet, who is the Senior Manager of Installed Loudspeakers for HARMAN and JBL Pro. What do you see as things that integrators may not know about ceiling speakers, for example?
Well, it depends on how much experience they have. Simple systems and fairly simple loudspeakers, let's say like ceiling speakers, they may forget to because it's a distributed system usually, and it has transformers built into the speakers, that with too much bass that the transformers can saturate. That's where you get an undeserved reputation of distributed speakers not sounding good. The solution to that is very, very simple, which is to put a protective high-pass filter into the electronics, into the DSP. How you set that and so on has in the past been somewhat of a mystery. So we now publish for all of our commercial speakers, for our all-weather compact speakers, for our CBT column speakers, we now publish what frequency that should be set at to protect that particular speaker, to allow the most amount of bass, but cut out the bass that's going to be harmful and it's going to cause the transformers to go into saturation. What happens when one transformer, let's say you have a dozen speakers on a system, and one of the speakers is a model that it's got a 5-watt transformer instead of a 10-watt transformer, and it goes into saturation, it sets off a chain reaction that whenever it goes into saturation, it actually makes the amplifier send distortion to all the other speakers in the system. So it's really important to protect those speakers from transformer saturation.
What's one of the craziest or most unique situations that you've come across?
Well, one of the most challenging situations is when a loudspeaker cannot be seen. So how do you build a loudspeaker into the decor of the place? We worked with a company that does dancing fountains, and they build our speakers into the rims of the fountains, and you know that regardless how well you protect that loudspeaker, some water's gonna get in there, so that becomes a challenge. There was a project in the Glendale area called Americana at Brand, and there's a fountain there. There are some of our controlled 29 speakers built into the rim of the fountain, and then there are lighting posts. Each post has 4 little speakers, two-way 5-inch loudspeakers, each one pointing a different direction. In between fountain shows, all 4 of those speakers are operational. When the fountain show comes on, 2 of those loudspeakers automatically shut off. The other 2 that are pointed away from the fountain then get just automatically delays kicked in, and they become the delay speakers for the fountain show. And yet you never know that they're there because they're built inside of lighting posts. Similarly at theme parks, you can walk around a theme park and you will swear that some of the decor is solid rock, and yet if you go behind the scene there, you'll see that there are loudspeakers projecting through acoustically transparent screens that are made to look like rock so well that you can't even tell that they're not rock.
We're just across the road from Disneyland. We're here in Anaheim, at NAMM, and I was in Disneyland recently. Happiest place on earth, love to go there. And you would have no idea that there are sound systems throughout the park because they're all disguised.
There are entire departments there that do nothing but how do you disguise the look of all sorts of ancillary equipment because you don't want to take away from the feeling that that attendees are actually in that area.
What about airports?
Well, airports, they have their own set of challenges. Some of them are regulatory, and depends on what part of the world they're located in. If they happen to be, let's say it's a train station in Europe, they've got to meet a code requirement called EN54 for life safety voice announce systems. It tends to be a space that is highly reverberant, and it's also a space, it's content that has to be well understood. We've probably all heard of the airport where they're paging for loading, and it's just a bunch of jumble,
just garbled, distorted sound.
Right.
Yeah.
So very well controlled sounds, such as our IntelliVox steerable and shapeable column speakers, are very popular in airport and other transit center applications. It sends more sound to the far listeners than the close listeners to offset the sound level differences that would normally come from being farther away. It keeps the sound off of the walls, off the ceiling, and lowers the reverberation. That all helps contribute to the intelligibility, so people can understand the paging that's happening.
HARMAN JBL is a bigger company than just the professional side of things.
Sure.
Are there innovations that find their way into consumer products?
Sure, there are innovations that find their way from pro products into consumer products, and from consumer products into pro products.
Yeah, can you give us an example of something like that?
There are some listening standards that actually a gentleman named Floyd Toole developed, called the Linear Spatial Reference guidelines, that he developed for small listening rooms, for studios, and now we use them fairly generically for all of our speakers to look at the not only what you're hearing on axis, but what you're hearing within a typical coverage window, and then also what is being sent to the room, which is going to be defining what's called the sound power, or the amount of sound that's being sent in all directions, and that affects the tonality that you actually get from the reverberant field within the room. There are some good programs these days for predicting what's going to happen, but there's no substitute for then relying on the best measurement equipment that there is, which is called our ears.
Yeah, and everybody's got a different way of hearing it, obviously.
Well, that's true, and sometimes it takes some training to know what it is you're listening to.
Well, it's been great speaking to you. I'm Nic Harcourt. I've been speaking with Rick Kamlet, who is the Senior Manager Installed Loudspeakers for HARMAN JBL Professional. Thanks for giving us an insight into your world.
Well, thank you.
Thanks,
thank you.
man.
I appreciate being here.